Welcome. We'll start in just a minute just to let anybody else who's still coming in join us. Okay, we're going to get started. Welcome to the talk about the impact of NACD, National Association of Conservation Districts, Technical Assistance Grants. Thank you for joining us. My name is Meg. I am the Projects and Partnerships Coordinator, and in that role, I am the one within that works with the individual grantees, making sure that they do their reporting and helping them take care of the logistics of handling these grants. I'm not the only one at NACD that works with these grants. There's actually about 12 of us that in one way or another are involved with the grant process, or working with our grantees. So before we talk about the impact of all the grants, I just wanted to touch on what the history of these are in case you haven't been that aware of them. These grants started out of a conversation in 2017. NRCS Acting Chief Jordan approached us. He was looking for a way to be able to direct some funding, possibly through the grants, where we ended up being, into some areas that had very high priority workloads that just needed something more to be able to address them and help clear it out, in particular for improving customer service. From that initial conversation, we signed a cooperative agreement with them that became our first set of grantees. Round one, which we also now refer to as TA 2018 because that's when the funds were awarded, are the first set of grantees that came out of that initial conversation. As you can see, most of the funding was focused on EQIP. And because of that, the way that the funding was directed in a large part was each state and territory was able to look within their EQIP workloads and be able to focus where they wanted the funds directed that way. Those first grants with the recipients, in most cases they are individual districts, but there are a few that are with RC&D councils, as well as state agencies, as well as state associations. But some of the first MOAs with the grantees were signed in February of that year. Most of them actually were allocated and signed over the summer, which then led us into the second year, an additional cooperative agreement with NRCS, which became TA 2019. With this year, some of the funding shifted. We also went through a process of deciding that one of the primary ideas was to keep the people that were funded with the initial grants working. And so the priority was for those grants to be able to continue funding the staff they had hired with the first grants. And actually only about a third of the second year recipients ended up going to new projects. That then led us into this year, the third round of these grants. Again, we used a priority system of the first looking at the existing projects to figure out who wanted continued funding. Those awards were announced in March. And last week, we awarded the remaining funds to new projects, things that are just getting started off the ground. And so the 2020 grant recipients are just getting started. Just to give you a little bit of idea, these funds are not being used for cost share. They're being used to staff people to be working in these high workload areas, these priority areas, to improve customer service to get more conservation on the ground. How those decisions are made is something that's done at the state and territory level. In each state, there is a group that we refer to as a conservation leadership, and it varies by state to state, but there's a core of 5 organizations that we look at as being part of that leadership. The State Association of Conservation Districts, NRCS, the State Conservation Agency, the RC&D Council, and the District Employees Association. And as I said, between one state and one territory and another, there are very few that actually have all 5 of those as an active part in their state leadership, but almost all of them have at least 2, if not 3. So that state conservation leadership talks among themselves on what is the priority, what is the issue that they need to address to clear more workload across their region, their state, their territory, and then they work to decide how that fund will actually be directed, whether it will be directed to an individual district, whether it will be handled at a different level, and within whoever there's being directed to, what the priority should be, where, if there isn't enough funding to go around, should the funding be directed first. All of this means is that these grants end up being very different when we look between one state, one territory, one recipient, and another, and it gives them a flexibility. With this year's grantees, we have now had technical assistance grants in all 50 states and 3 of the U.S. territories. And we're very pleased with that, about the wide diversity of how these funds are being used. So the question becomes then, what is the impact of them? The first round of grants, the 2018 grants, are pretty much done. There is only about a dozen that are still open, and most of them expect to be finished with their work within the next 60 to 90 days. As I said, the 2020 grants are just getting started. Some of them that were renewals back in March have been able to hit the ground running, and they've already got 60 to 90 days of work done, but then there are plenty that will be just getting started into their funds over the next 6 months. The 2019 funds, though, are the ones that are being heavily used at this time. And as I said, these funds are meant to fund staff. And so when we look at just the funding from the 2019 funds, about $10 million that funds entail are actually funding roughly about 280 full and part-time staff across the country. And about a third of them are part-time. When we go out and ask the not quite 200 recipients what titles those staff are working under, they come back with over 100 different particular titles. No 2 people are really doing the same job. They are doing the job that is needed to be able to get the work done within their area, their region. If we split it up into 5 different general categories, they break down that most of the work is being done by resource technicians, but there is quite a few people falling in different categories. When we look at when we look at the 2.5 years that these grants have now been out there and the staff has been working, they have put in over 600,000 hours. If we assume then that a full-time staff would be working 2,080 hours for a year, that is the equivalent of over 300 full-time staff on the ground doing work and helping the districts. So what's happening with them? Well, the first grant was heavily focused on EQIP accomplishments. And so we can quickly tattle up all the work that's being done under those funds, but it's also important to realize that not everything getting a charge to EQIP fits into these simple categories. In particular, taking just one example of the grant to New Mexico is a statewide grant. They're using the funds to fund archaeologists, because when the state partnership looked at what was going on and where their bottleneck was, they decided that their biggest bottleneck was clearing cultural reviews. They didn't have the staff to be able to get them done. It was hanging up getting EQIP work accomplished. So they are using their funding to be able to contract with a couple of archaeologists who are clearing the cultural reviews. When you look at this chart of numbers, the only place that their work is actually going to show up is under assisted contracts. And so these numbers give us a spot shot into what's going on, but they don't tell the full picture of what's actually happening out on the ground, getting conservation on the ground. The Conservation Operation Technical Assistance Funds, at its highest level, of course, is all about writing conservation plans. And again, while 14,000 conservation plans is a nice number for 2.5 years, it's not giving us the full picture, because on one hand, those conservation plans are written plans at the operations level to be able to work through what needs to be done and be able to start working through EQIP contracts and such. But some of the funding is also going, I'm going to stay in the Southwest for an example, of Nevada. They took their conservation plans, their conservation operations technical assistance funds, and they directed it into hiring 7 contractors for the 7 regions of the state, with the idea that the contractors would write a formal long-term plan of what needed to be done across the state in terms of directing money, directing projects to be able to get a full picture. That is what their conservation leadership decided was the overriding bottleneck to being able to get work done on the ground. So whereas we might look at an individual district writing operation plans, and at the end of a year, they might have 40 or 50 plans written, when we look at Nevada and their grant, their accomplishments for a year was 7 plans. And then the last part, of course, is the Conservation Stewardship Program, where some of the funds are being directed only from the 2019 and the 2020 grants. It's important to realize within CSP that some states have very large viable CSP programs. So they are using the funds to write plans, to write contracts, to get conservation on the ground. But in other states, they are using CSP funding to introduce people to what can be done with CSP and making sure that they are raising awareness of what's going on and what's available. That is just a snapshot of everything that's going on. I want to bring your attention to the NACD website. We have a section on technical assistance grants, and just this week, we unveiled a story map covering these grants. If you go to the story map and you can zoom in, find out where these grants are located, how many years they've received funding, and we also now have links active on it leading to where we have published written stories about what's actually going on at the local level. But to be able to really give you that view, I've asked 4 of our grantees to come in and share with you what they're doing with these grants and where they're going. And we're going to start off with Indiana. Guys?
Thanks, Meg. I hope everyone can hear me this afternoon, and I really appreciate this opportunity to be a part of this. And Meg, thank you very much for thinking of us. I know you've put up with us going into now our 3rd year, so it's been a great experience. And I will open by saying, if there's anyone out there that's participating in this, I'd encourage you now to think about this program and what benefit it can mean to you, your district, and to your community, because it's certainly been a strong asset for us here in Allen County, Indiana. My name is Greg Lake. I'm the district director with the Allen County Soil and Water Conservation District. Meg, if you want to go to the next slide. To give a little bit of background of why we looked at this program, I think you first need to understand our situation here. We're nested up in the northeast corner of Indiana. We are the largest county in the state of Indiana. We also have the 2nd largest community or city, Indianapolis, of course, being the largest down in the central part of our state. We're up here with the city of Fort Wayne, nestled right in the middle of our our county. So we have a lot of urban interface for the Saltwater District here. Having said that, though, since we're the largest county, we still have, it used to be the largest cropland base of any county in the state. I'm not sure we can still claim that title because of the urbanization that's occurred, but we certainly have a very large crop base for Indiana. We also have over in our northeast corner of our county, we have a rather large, one of the bigger ones in the U.S., Amish population. And one of my co-presenters here will be sharing a little bit about that in just a few minutes. And although the map doesn't show it, one thing that's unique to Allen County, I think, or somewhat unique at least, is we got water or drainage that goes both to the Great Lakes, in our case, Lake Erie, but about the western third of our county drains to the Mississippi. So we've got different sets of challenges. Perhaps you've obviously heard of in recent years of the challenges that we've faced with the Western Lake Erie Basin issue. And for example, when the city of Toledo had to shut down its drinking water supply because of the excess nutrients hitting the Western Basin of Lake Erie and causing some toxic algal blooms, which forced the intake to be shut down, and Toledo had to shut down their system, and folks in that were relying on the Toledo water system basically were without water for a couple of days. So it's provided us some unique challenges where we sit at the base of two larger watersheds, the St. Joe and the St. Mary's watershed. They come into Fort Wayne from Northwest Ohio and Southern Michigan and come up to us from just to the southwest of us in near Grand Lake St. Mary's, and they come into downtown Fort Wayne where they merge and they form the Maumee, which then heads up to Lake Erie. So a lot of the work that the district's done is focused more on the western 2/3 of our county, and we'll be sharing a little bit about some of the challenges that we've had on that. But I want to jump next, if you will. Meg, jump to my last slide, please. Thank you. I think it's important to understand what it's done for the district. The program has really given us an opportunity to start to engage with new cooperators, with new farmers. Apologize for the quality of the picture, but this one is, I think, sort of unique because it was a nice blend of both English as well as Amish farmers at an event that we had just about a year ago. And we've struggled as a district to get a strong working relationship with our Amish friends here within our county. We had a great relationship with them a few decades ago, but they've become a little bit more reluctant as far as our programs, and Mike will be addressing that. The key thing here is the ability for us to address our customers' needs. We'll have folks come in that have a need that perhaps can be addressed through an EQIP or CSP type program, but we've also got other programs that the district's operating that perhaps we can work through a GLRI, 319, or just simply provide direct technical assistance, not intertwined with any state or federal program. Last but certainly not least, for us being in a large urban area, it's increased the district's presence. We are always mindful of the fact that we are a part of a voluntary program in an urban community, keeping our local elected officials, our state legislature, and others aware that we're out there and what we're doing is really important. So having an extra person in the field assisting with that has been a big benefit to our district. So I'm going to close here and pass it off to Tim, but my encouragement is for everyone that's out there, take a good close look at this program. I think you'll find it beneficial to your district.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Are you muted?
I am now.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Greg. As the district conservationist, I was a little bit apprehensive to sign on to this agreement, pretty much because we had an existing agreement that was providing the same deliverables and assistance opportunity for me. But looking into it more deeply, and you can move to the next slide. I'm sorry, Meg. We were able to take a better look at it, and we realized we had the ability to think outside the box. And in really looking at the situation we were in, where we were at with our delivery system, we came up with 3 items. The first one was we needed to expand our customer base. And in looking at applications that we had, contracts we had, and actually going back 5 years, I saw that we were working with the same landowners on the same acres. So we needed to do a better job with outreach. The second item was dealing with the doubters. And you have two groups there. One, the no-goers, that's never going to work. And the second are the ones that were riding on the fence. They had the right mindset, but they weren't ready to make that jump. And the third, deal with adversities. Anybody that's been involved in agriculture, you know every situation is going to be unique. Every growing season is also going to be unique. So we needed to do a better job at those three things. Next slide, please. So looking at the first item, expanding our customer base through the outreach efforts, we were definitely able to do that through this agreement. And looking at it now, I've noticed that we have really opened the doors up to more small acre farms. And most important, and Greg mentioned it, really are beginning to get the participation from the historically underserved. Next slide. Dealing with the doubters, I believe we definitely have had some improvements there, and we're doing that through experience, bringing on somebody that has the experience, hands-on experience, has seen the hurdles, the roadblocks that you're going to run into, and along with the experience, having the ability to take them out to an active farm, show them in person what it is we're trying to get them to adopt. Next slide, please. Dealing with adversities. Two big adversities, weather. Usually it's the last 3 to 5 years, it's been weather related, severe rains. So having somebody to give them the upfront knowledge, have a plan, have plan B, plan C, and then also looking at the equipment challenges. You may have the right equipment, is it set up proper? So those are the three things that I believe we, not only NRCS, but Allen County residents have gotten out of this agreement. And next slide. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Whirling. He's the man that has made this whole thing work.
All right. You can go. I'm Mike Whirling with the County Stormwater Conservation District. Meg, would you? Working with historically underserved producers, Greg referred to the Amish. They are self-reliant and reluctant to accept funds from others. But we have started, and we have a base group of farmers that are leaders in the community, and that will lead us and helps us lead to reaching others. We held Amish meetings, as Greg said, and we also have had them accept funds, cost share, to establish forage and pasture seeding through a GLRI grant. So that are looking at programs of Tim's, it helps to have someone here to talk to them, to relate to them. I especially enjoy talking to our urban neighbors about the myths of farming, and looking forward to an urban ag grant that will be starting soon here outside of this. Meg, next slide, please. When we deal with the doubters, as Tim said, I offer the farm tour. I'll go into that just a minute. What they need, and typically in the past, is I have this is my bird, it's coming up. I tell people when I hand that out that is a ticket for the farm tour. And I'll take them down to my farm and show them what we're doing and what it's on. So they see that conservation in practice, and starts. So, business card. Oh, okay. Meg, give me another one, would you? I believe my video froze, so I'm gonna wing this. Okay. There's the card. That's their ticket for the farm tour, and all my my farming philosophies up there. Go on, Meg.
Excuse me, you got 5 minutes.
Okay. Good. Next step for conservation for us with the no-till. This is one of my fields this year, the tractor. There is a lot of problems, or there can be problems. I say whether you plan it or not, if someone's planning on doing it smaller than this, 1, 2, the rain, the sewer I can jump from 2 foot. Nothing worse than in the planter. It's the hardest thing to do. I show one of the closing wheels there that I have figured out one of the best ways to solve that problem. Okay, Meg. Some people that do not like, that have hesitancy to work with agency employees, maybe Amish or English. So I'm a little less connected to the agency. So we talk, we discuss. The NACD grant has expanded just what I'm doing into another grant, an NRCS contribution agreement that's giving us soil testing and nutrient recommendations to farmers. We see that is one of the things that helps. It's been very helpful and very interesting for me to do this. I see an open shop door and visit. I spend a lot of time listening to the way things will not work from the farmers, from the producers, and helping them work or understand the issues. So I'm phased out again. Is that sound still on?
You're on your last slide, Mike. And you got about a minute.
Yep, addressing adversity. Oh yeah, there we go. So that's just one of the ways that we're helping in incorporating the livestock production, no-till cover crops, and we're also helping nutrient management to with other grants and with Tim's programs. So it expands out what I've done. So I'm good to go.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Move to Kansas.
And we'll move to Kansas.
Thanks, Meg. I'm Carrie Harris. I'm the district manager with the Franklin County Conservation District in Ottawa, Kansas.
And I'm Caitlin Gibbons, and I'm the conservation agronomist for the Franklin County Conservation District. And I was hired through this pilot project technical assistance grant.
So Ottawa, Kansas is about an hour and a half southwest of the Kansas City metropolitan area. We're about an hour away from the University of Kansas and 2 hours from Kansas State University, kind of here east central part of the state. We are, our conservation district started in 1941, And through the years, we've had very limited staff. We have I've been with the district almost 20 years, and I've been the only employee here. Other than a 2-year period, we had a grant to do some buffer water quality work. So this project came about, and I was super excited about it to get, number one, office assistance and get more boots on the ground to help us do our conservation implementation. Through our pilot project, of course, we work with NACD and NRCS, and then Truterra, which falls under the umbrella of the Land O'Lakes Corporation, and was actually developed by Jason Weller, who many of you probably know was the former NRCS chief. So we have a great working relationship there. He's very familiar with our programs. And then our local ag-retailer that has that business connection with Land O'Lakes and Truterra is the Ottawa Co-op. They are a 12-location entity serving 9 counties here in the East Central Kansas area. And I think we've all seen the benefits of this program, so we'll go into it just a little bit. Meg, if you want to advance that slide. So the first project goal for our technical assistance grant was to hire local staff to serve as somewhat as the middleman between the producers, the ag retailers, and NRCS USDA, to show producers how the agronomic decisions that they were already making on their farm fit into various conservation programs. At the time that we started this project, we did not have a local district conservationist on staff. So the previous presentation that you saw, we did not have a TIM, and that was a huge hurdle for us, but we knew we had the workload and the need for more staff. And the agronomist is working through the 9-step conservation planning to identify resource concerns. And now, as the project has advanced, we were able to, NRCS was able to hire a district conservationist for this field office in February. And things have really started to move along since we have that full-time NRCS presence in our office again. Go ahead to the next one, Meg. So the second project goal of this grant, as it came about, was primarily to strengthen the public and private partnership, as I'd mentioned, to share with those producers the benefits and the connections between those agronomic decisions that they're already making. We are working through these partnerships to reach even more producers, to help them implement more sustainable practices on their farm and possibly offset the installation and implementation costs. So if someone's thinking about converting to no-till, we're able to have our agronomist go out and meet with them and explain some of the programs that are available and some of the benefit payments that they might not have even been aware of. And so if they're able to come in and sign up for EQIP or CSP, whichever program it might fall under, we do have some state-funded cost share programs as well that are short-term contracts. But just to kind of let those producers know that some of the stuff they're thinking about doing, there might be some financial assistance tied to. And with that, the first action step that we undertook, go ahead, Meg, to the next slide, sorry. The first action step that we undertook through the grant after we got all the paperwork and everything signed off was the memorandum of understanding with NACD and Land O'Lakes. We were able to get funding through both entities for this particular project. Here in Kansas, the conservation districts receive county funds as well as a little bit of state funding. Our state funding for operating expenses ends up being right around $20,000 a year. And so there was no possible way that without this technical assistance grant, we would have ever been able to do a project of this magnitude with the cooperation with Land O'Lakes. We worked with co-ops some, but not to this scale and not in this 9-county area. So this has been huge financially and on the ground benefit for our county and our producers. And with that, then the first action step also included hiring Caitlin as our agronomist. She is an Iowa State University grad and started here in November of 2019. Next slide, please. The first step was training. We started teaching her what can be overwhelming, all the NRCS programs, standards and specs, excuse me, and then the policies and rules and regs under the programs for EQIP and so forth. As I mentioned, our district conservationist came on board in February, and then with COVID, we were out of the office to where he was the only one in, and then finally they were allowing us to have 2 employees in the office. So Caitlin was able to come in and work with him and get a lot of one-on-one training that really helped ramp up the NRCS side of things. I'm going to let Caitlin go ahead and talk about some of the other training that she's done with the ag retailers and Truterra.
So yes, as Carrie said, I am the conservation agronomist, and with the Truterra platform, I'll just kind of touch on what it is, but it encompasses a lot, so I'm still learning the ins and outs of it. But what it is it's a precision-based stewardship tool, and farmers can use it to measure and improve their on-farm sustainability, as well as look at improving their returns on investment as well. And what's nice about this tool is it's not product nor price-based, so it's truly a tool that's farmer-driven and benefits the farmer directly. And so with the training on this, I first attended a couple regional meetings where I was kind of got my feet wet with what Truterra was, what the goals were, and then I worked with co-op staff and the Truterra manager at the Ottawa Co-op. I worked alongside her to enter data and get to know some of the growers, and then eventually she trusted me with the program to start entering data on my own and set up grower meetings. So with that, there's a picture there, and that just shows one of the many field signs I've put up for different growers in the program. So if you want to go to the next slide. Okay, so action step number 3 is kind of the long-term goals. And long-term, this position was designed so that I could do field work, host field days and events to educate private industry agronomists about the Farm Bill programs and how they overlap the agronomy decisions that are being made on the farm and the benefits producers can see from participating in programs. Because like was mentioned in the previous presentation, a lot of farmers are either on the fence about these programs or they don't even know they exist in the first place. So next slide, please. So with this new pilot position, this is the first position of its kind. And so with that, you're kind of blazing a new trail. So as expected, there were a lot of challenges at first, just communicating with all the partner agencies and getting on the same page with the team. So first, as Carrie talked about earlier, there was no NRCS district conservationist on staff when I was hired. So it kind of limited my training, but I was able to go out to other different field offices and train and learn some different specializations under other NRCS USDA employees. And then COVID-19 happened, so that put another damper on the plans because then I was kind of no longer able to meet with those producers and have those one-on-one meetings. But we've kind of bounced back from that, and I've found ways to work through that and meet with producers from a distance and do some online things. And also with this comes shortage of funds, which can just be expected, and state nationally for the programs that we are promoting. But we are working through that. And then also probably the hardest thing is communication with all these different partner agencies, especially with the co-op and private industry. You're working with a lot of agronomists and different staff, and just getting on the same page and laying out the expectations, what they expect of me and what I expect from them, and then introducing me, the new guy, to the farmers so they open up to me, because early on the farmers didn't know who I was, but as I began going to different events and speaking at different events about soil health and cover crops, I've kind of gotten to know some of them And I began taking on grower meetings by myself and meeting with those growers to promote and accelerate conservation programs.
We found there was a little bit of a challenge introducing an Iowa State grad here in K-State territory, but it seems to be working out pretty well. So we'll go ahead to the next slide, Meg.
So with the benefits of this partnership and this technical assistance grant, we can really see the long-term benefits. And I've been in this position about 8 months now. And really, when I was hired, they told me that they expected the first year to be training and building relationships. And I think we've surpassed that. I've really been able to build strong relationships with the different partner agencies, with NRCS, the local conservation districts, the farmers, Ottawa Co-op, other private retailers, and just the community as well. And so we also, some of the values of this is integrated conservation assistance to shared customers. And that really helps build the trust with the producer, because they may have a strong relationship with Ottawa Co-op, and so they see that I'm partnered with them, so that sometimes incentivizes them to want to work with NRCS or state cost share programs. And then it allows field offices to have improved customer service, and like Carrie said, it puts more boots on the ground and reduces the workload pressure, as many of you know, that can happen at these offices. And then it strengthens the technical assistance by accelerating conservation practice adoption, and it increases the producer's knowledge and awareness of these government programs. And if they have any questions or concerns, they can come to me and ask those, and I can also help ease the process of applying for these different programs. And we see it being very rewarding in the new future, because we could be able to assist private industry customers that are using Truterra seamlessly into these government program applications. And we think this will save the customers time and ultimately increase their awareness and get more conservation on the ground in our area.
And as she said, she's been on since November. The grant has kind of been in the works a little bit longer than that, of course, but in that short amount of time, Kansas has been able to bring on 2 additional pilot projects through the technical assistant grants. There will be the same conservation agronomist positions in north central and western-ish Kansas, working with Land O'Lakes, Truterra, and their local cooperative. We are very fortunate here in Kansas. Our Kansas Association of Conservation Districts current executive director is retired NRCS area resource conservationist and has many years of experience on the NRCS side. So I think Dan Meyerhoff, he has played a big role in helping us get to where we are with this grant. Meg has been wonderful to help us stumble through the learning blocks as this pilot project has taken off, but just the benefits, the shared customers, and just truly getting conservation out on the ground, which is why we all do what we do. And I think it's been wonderful, and we appreciate the financial support, obviously, for this project from NACD, NRCS, Land O'Lakes, and thank you for asking us to be on today. I think with that, Christy with the Tyonek Tribal Conservation District is next.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Christy?
Sorry, just unmuting myself. Hi, everyone. My name is Christy Sincata. I'm the Executive Director of Tyonek Tribal Conservation District. And thanks so much, Meg. Like others in this group and across the country, this technical assistance grant has made a huge difference for our organization, for the people we serve, and for getting conservation on the ground. So I'm happy to share today a little bit about that story. Next slide. And yeah, this is just a view of the native village of Tyonek on one of my commutes over there by Bush Plain. Next slide. Tyonek Tribal Conservation District is a non-regulatory tribal nonprofit organization whose mission is to conserve, enhance, and encourage the wise use of natural resources. And TTCD was formed as the first tribal conservation district in the state of Alaska back in 2005. And that was formed through a mutual agreement between the native village of Tyonek, that's the local tribal government, between the Tyonek Native Corporation, who's the major landowner in our area, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. As I said, it was the first in the state. I think there are 18 tribal conservation districts now, with a few more in the process of forming. And our district covers 6.5 million acres, or I think a little over 8 Rhode Islands in South Central Alaska. It's a pretty vast landscape, and you can see there's a few communities there. The largest community in our district is Tyonek at just under 200 people. So we have a large area with a small population. And you can also see Anchorage on the map there to give a little bit of an idea of where the district is located. I think it's about a little over 40 miles. Tyonek is about 40 miles west of Anchorage. Next slide. So we deal with many challenges doing conservation work in our district that relate to remoteness and accessibility. So you can see in this photo, the main way of getting to Tyonek from Anchorage is by bush plane. Tyonek, as well as all of the communities in our district, are off-road communities in Alaska, which means they're not connected by road to the main road system and the major cities in our state. For the majority of our staff at TTCD are based in Anchorage. We have some staff based in Tyonek, but mainly we're in Anchorage, which means we have to fly over in small planes. Our local NRCS field office is located in Kenai, which is a 3-hour drive from Anchorage. So to coordinate a visit to go over to Tyonek, that's people driving up to Anchorage, all of us getting on a plane. And if the fog rolls in, that plane is not going to be able to go to Tyonek. So I also mentioned climate and short field season, but weather is part of that. For doing conservation work out there, there's not that much you can fit on a small plane. So for big projects, we have to coordinate with barging or cargo planes, and all of those present their own challenges. And we have a short field season in which to get out, do conservation planning work, do work on the ground. Also, for folks living in Tyonek, it's a small community. There is no grocery store there. If you want to go to a grocery store, you're going to get on a plane, take a 20-minute flight to Anchorage, which is a short flight, but it's still $210 round trip to go to the store. So in Tyonek, people are really tied to their local resources: hunting, fishing, growing your own. It's not only culturally important, but it's really an economic necessity in our district. Next slide. So at TTCD, we have 2 core values, and those are to meet the needs of our district stakeholders and to foster cooperative relationships. And those really form the basis of our strategies and how we get our work done. So we call ourselves a community-driven conservation organization. All of the work that we do relates directly to needs and issues that are brought up by community members, and we address those issues through community involvement. Also, partnerships are very important. We're a small organization that deals with a large area. Having close relationships with federal entities, state entities, the tribe, corporations, nonprofits, and others is really the only way that we can get our work done. And so we're really grateful to have a lot of good partners that help us to do more than we could on our own. Next slide. And before getting more into the details of what we do with our technical assistance grant, I just wanted to give a quick overview of our main programs at TTCD. So our habitat monitoring and restoration program is our program to monitor and restore fish and wildlife habitat. As I mentioned, hunting, fishing, those resources are very important, and people in Tyonek in our district view subsistence as their agriculture. Salmon is a major priority for the folks in our district, so a lot of the work we do in this program relates to ensuring that we're finding ways to benefit and support healthy salmon populations. And not only for subsistence, but a lot of folks in our district are commercial fishermen as well. We also have a Tyonek Grown program. Through that program, we improve food security through community agriculture. There's a photo here of the Tyonek Garden, which is a 1.5-acre farm in Tyonek. as one of the first projects that TTCD was asked to assist with when we started, was developing this, this farm, and we also manage the program now. You can see there's two NRCS funded high tunnels there, which make a big difference in Alaska. And this program, it's not only about growing food in the community, but it's very closely tied to youth education. So kids are involved in every step of the growing process. And it's a little bit challenging this year with the school closed. We were able to find ways to make it work, but usually the school is very involved, and we also hire youth interns every summer. Next slide. Our other programs are technical assistance. In that program, we mainly address issues such as waste reduction and energy conservation. We currently have a grant with the Department of Energy to do some energy efficiency upgrades on tribal buildings. And we also try to address waste issues in the district. So you see lead batteries there that needed to be removed from the district. We worked with partners to do that. And our Tyonek Youth Conservation Science Program, that's a conservation-based education program at the K-12 school in Tyonek, where we do monthly lessons. A lot of them involve agriculture and the Tyonek garden, but we also do watershed science, salmon life cycle, invasive plant work, and a variety of other things. Next slide. Okay, so now to our grant and the difference it's made in our district. So in 2019, TTCD was grateful to receive a grant through the NACD Technical Assistance Program. The goal of this grant is for TTCD to assist the NRCS field office staff with the development of 3 conservation plans within our district. As a certified conservation planner, this grant helps support my time and travel to work with NRCS, as well as with the main landowner in our district, Tyonek Native Corporation, to get conservation work planned and implemented. Next slide. The main resource concern that we focus on through this grant and through the majority of our work is habitat. So you can see this is a map showing Tyonek and the surrounding areas. And I mentioned that Tyonek is off the road system. It's off the main road system, but there's actually an extensive road system in Tyonek to get to different areas out there. And a lot of these roads intersect with salmon streams. Salmon is a priority in our district, and salmon are an anadromous species that needs unobstructed movement through their watershed in order to thrive. A lot of these roads were actually put in the 1960s by oil, gas, and timber companies doing resource development work. And when they were putting the roads in, they weren't really thinking about salmon and how salmon were going to make it through those culverts that they put in. It was just to get the road across the stream. And so, unfortunately, a lot of these culverts were built in such a way that they're undersized, they're perched, they just don't let salmon get through to their upstream habitat. And that upstream habitat is really important for salmon so that they can forage for food, hide from predators, overwinter, spawn. And so having that habitat blocked to salmon for decades has really had an impact on those populations and on the people that rely on those salmon. So TTCD for years has been working with partners to address these fish passage barriers, not only for supporting the subsistence and commercial fish resource, but also because a lot of these culverts don't necessarily deal well with high water events. So because they're undersized, there's flood events causing these roads to wash out. They have to continually be rebuilt. So that's a high cost. These projects, doing these culvert replacements in our district, are very expensive. Because they're off the road system, that means equipment, the culverts themselves, big rock like riprap, it's not in our district. All of that has to be barged in. So a lot of these projects are upwards of $1 million. They involve a lot of different partners, federal, state partners that work with us on the projects, but also the local residents and people that use the roads. And so there's a lot of coordinating that goes into making these projects happen. I do a lot of fundraising to find the money to get the projects done on the ground, but what the technical assistance grant through NACD has really done has helped provide me with the time to coordinate all of the aspects of these projects to make sure that they go smoothly. And that makes a big difference for making sure that the projects can get done. Next slide. So in 2019, we worked closely with Tyonek Native Corporation and NRCS to complete conservation plans for 2 fish passage culvert replacement projects through the NACD Technical Assistance Grant and funding from other partners. This is a project on the Chewitna River tributary where the original culvert was blocking 3.6 miles of upstream habitat. By putting in the culvert that you see in this photo, now salmon can get up and utilize all of that area. And you see the man standing there, David Croto, is a representative of the Tyonek Native Corporation, or the landowner. They're very happy to work with us and NRCS on improving the infrastructure on their lands that also is going to make a difference for their stakeholders and people living in the area relying on salmon. Next slide. This is another project that we completed in. Oops.
Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Oh, there it is. Okay. So this is another project we completed in 2019. This is on a tributary of the Old Tyonek Creek. This one blocked 1.3 upstream miles and 19.8 lake acres. And you see there's a variety of folks here in this photo. So there's the construction crew, the contractor, there's the inspectors making sure that everything's built according to the design. And there's our partners at U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the NRCS who designed this project. Again, the technical assistance grant really made a difference for helping us to coordinate all of these different partners and moving parts to get these projects done. Next
5
slide.
minutes.
Okay. During 2019, while we were finishing those plans and implementing those projects, we also worked with our partners and NRCS staff to develop conservation plans for 2 more culvert projects to be implemented in 2020. And those projects were actually just finished at the end of June. So this is a photo of construction going on at the Old Tyonek, another tributary of the Old Tyonek Creek. This one blocked 1.2 upstream miles and 19 lake acres. At this site, it's really beautiful, pristine habitat, but the culvert was about a 4-foot perch. And I was out there before the project happened watching salmon try to make that jump into a very undersized culvert where water was just shooting through. So they were not making it. This project makes a big difference because now those salmon aren't going to waste their time trying to get through a culvert where they can't, and they can actually get up to their upstream habitat. And also, this is a road that provided access to a subsistence fish camp. So road users and multiple families now can get more easily to their site. This site was washing out almost on an annual basis. They were having to rebuild the road, which is a big expense and kind of an emergency hazard if people get trapped. Next slide. And yes, this project, the culvert itself was good for fish passage, but had potential issues of water going too quickly through it during high water events. So we added an overflow culvert and also did some stream bed work to improve the habitat. Next slide. In addition to fish passage, in 2019, we started looking at a potential fuel break project around fish camp sites in collaboration with NRCS staff and the Tyonek Native Corporation, the landowner. We did some preliminary data collection in 2019 with the plan to go back out and do more data collection this year. With COVID and the pandemic, we just didn't deem this essential travel, and we decided to wait a little bit while still having conversations, and hopefully we can get this project to move forward next year. Next slide. Yeah, so overall, through this grant, we were able to assist NRCS in the development and implementation of 4 conservation plans that provided us with more time to plan potential EQIP projects and work with partners to get these projects implemented. All of the culvert projects that I discussed did go forward to become EQIP contracts. And it really helped us to accomplish on-the-ground conservation work by just providing us more support and more time for coordinating all of the moving parts of these projects. Thank you.
And with that, we'll go to Vermont.
Hey,
By
good
the way,
afternoon.
yeah, before you get started, Vicki, we'll answer questions after this last presentation. Use the question and answer box if you have any questions for presenters. All yours, Vicki.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Meg, and thank you so much for inviting Vermont to be part of sharing these stories. I've been really excited to hear what's been happening in other states. I'm Vicki Drew, State Conservationist with NRCS in Vermont, and our project took on a really different flavor than a lot of the other projects that we've seen highlighted today. So I think it's very nice that NACD invited us to talk about this because it was somewhat of a unique approach. So I'm going to be joined by Jill Arachi, the Executive Director of the Vermont Association of Conservation Districts. Next slide, Meg. So just so everybody's aware, you might not remember where Vermont is located. We're smack up against the Canadian border, sandwiched between the state of New York and the state of New Hampshire. And we have the beautiful spine of the Green Mountains going down the center of our state. And we are a very rural state, 49th in the nation in terms of our total population. And our largest city is less than 50,000 people. And interestingly enough, Christy, we have about the same amount of acres in Vermont as what you have in your tribal district. So when you do the math, the 9.6 thousand square miles comes out to a little over 6 million acres. And if you look at the population density, it's about 10 acres per person. So a very rural state for sure. Just a note that since March, we have lost just shy of 5% of our dairy farms since COVID hit. So it's been very sad state of affairs here. So about 1/5 of the state is dedicated to agricultural production, and we have a variety of products that are produced in Vermont. Obviously, many of you probably know about Ben and Jerry's and the wonderful ice cream that comes from Vermont. It's not the only great ice cream in Vermont, I will say that. And we also are the #1 producer of maple syrup nationwide. And so that tends to be a fill in the gap business for a lot of producers, particularly dairy farmers who might also have a sugar bush. And then we also obviously have some very large commercial maple operations as well. But despite maple, about 75% to 80% of our ag income is derived from dairy products. So dairy is definitely the predominant industry, and I believe Vermont is also #1 in the percent of ag sales dedicated to one commodity. So we rely heavily on our dairy industry. Next slide. So even though we're nowhere near the largest state in New England, we often refer to ourselves as a region in the New England states, and we do have the largest agricultural economy, largely as a result of both the dairy and maple industries. All right, next. So that's just a little background about Vermont and give you a little bit of history about our agency. So as I said, I'm with NRCS, and we historically have had, we have 14 counties in Vermont, and historically have had 10 field offices, and we still do have 10 field offices. However, we used to have a district conservationist in every single one of those field offices. And in 2006, 2007, the prior state conservationists went through a reorganization strategy and developed what's called a 10-10 package to go down to the national office to reorganize and divide our state into 4 broad zones. So we now have 4 district conservationists covering multiple counties with multiple conservation districts and multiple field offices. So they have staff that are not co-located with them across these field offices and work with a variety of districts. And in fact, in the southern district, the southern zone, the area that's on my map showing up kind of orangey pink is, there are 5 conservation districts in that zone that district conservationist works with. We have, in addition to the 4 zone district conservationists, we identified back in 2008 when we went through this reorganization that we needed program assistants for each one of those district conservationists. I'm going to describe their role a little bit more in a few more slides, but so we started off with 4 zone district conservationists and 4 program assistants, which are essentially the administrative support to those DCs. We still have 10 field offices, as I mentioned, and a total of 73 employees. That's our FTE cap. So next. Jill, did you want to describe this slide?
Yes. Hi, everybody. This is Jill, Vermont Association of Conservation Districts. And I'm just going to briefly tell you a little bit about our district. So we have 14 districts in Vermont. They're delineated by either watershed or county. Those little white lines are watersheds. There's 16 sub-watersheds. We have 3 major watersheds in Vermont. And those are our districts. So our districts are local government entities with 1 or more employees who are entirely grant funded. They work very hard to raise money to support themselves. And we found, and the Vermont Association of Conservation Districts is a 501c3 nonprofit. And we found that organizing things on a statewide level, because Vermont is a small state, was more efficient for everyone rather than making every district manager do everything. VACD and our partner state agency, the Natural Resources Conservation Council, we provide a lot of the central fundraising and grant activity for the districts that try to help the district. So this is just a snapshot of who we are. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Meg. Thanks, Jill. So historically, NRCS turned to the conservation districts to help us fill a role called the land treatment planner. And with the dairy industry in Vermont, we had a significant need to develop comprehensive nutrient management plans. And for those of you who know the requirements associated with CNMP, you know that one of the required components is a land treatment plan. And the land treatment plan is essentially a conservation plan that looks at erosion issues on the fields where agricultural waste is, or manure, I hate to call it waste, is to be applied, and looks at all the erosion and the conservation practices needed to farm to tea or farm sustainably so that we can keep that erosion in check in the areas where manure is going to be applied. About the same time that we entered into the earliest agreements with VACD to do this work, these land treatment planners, the state of Vermont had a very robust farm regulation in place called the Large Farm Operations, which basically supersedes the EPA CAFO requirements. So for any farm with greater than 700 animal units, instead of having to go through EPA to get a CAFO, the state of Vermont rules are actually more strict. And we needed those land treatment plans developed to help those large farm operations get the permits they needed in order to continue operating. Since then, the state actually moved to also regulate farms from 200 to 700 livestock animal units per farm, and so they also required a land treatment plan. So we've been very busy developing these land treatment plans for roughly about 300 farms over the last 300 dairy farms, all 200 cows or larger, for the last well, 10 to 15 years. I moved to Vermont in 2006, and this program was underway, Jill, at that point. And so I don't actually know when it got started. I think it was 2004 or so with the land treatment plans. In 2014, then Secretary Tom Vilsack announced a strategic initiative for Lake Champlain, which is our lake to the west of Vermont, which most of our agricultural land drains into. We have very impaired water quality concerns in the lake, in the northern part and southern parts of the lake. And we were not able to hire staff to staff up to meet this growing need and actually help work on the additional funding that we received, an additional $45 million over 5 years to address Lake Champlain from 2015 through 19. So we turned to VACD at that time. And again, as Jill mentioned, we don't have individual agreements with the individual districts. We've always historically worked through VACD because it's just so much more efficient from an administrative point of view on both sides, on the district sides as well as on our side. And we slowly began to fill in a lot of gaps for filling the need to help us meet this new initiative. And you'll see at the bottom that we quickly realized that we needed more than one program assistant per district conservationists. So they then began to start filling in the gaps on that program assistance role. And we put out an RFP. We can't just give that much money to VACD without competing it. And so we put out an RFP, and VACD was the successful bidder both 2 times in a row. So we've had 2 5-year agreements with them supporting a number of positions. Next.
So this is a map of the VACD staff, and those thick lines there are the NRCS zones. So just to note that NRCS and districts work so closely that the zones were delineated along district boundaries, which is pretty cool, not county or watershed boundaries. So this gives you a feel of the VACD staff statewide. It's a little bit out of date, but not including management or administrative staff, we have about 20 staff who provide technical assistance and administrative assistance to support NRCS programs. So we call them the Farm Bill support staff. They also cover CRP and some other programs, as needed, but we tend to think of them as the NRCS support staff at the field level. And as shown in the earlier slide, there's a variety of positions: conservation planners, wetlands, easements, program assistants, cultural resources. And we basically provide the hiring and supervisory and framework. These staff work almost all in NRCS offices. Just the management staff basically are not in NRCS offices. So the partnership is very tight there. The agreement is now over $2.2 million over 5 years. NRCS adds funds every year. And the cost share, we had to figure this out for our audit, is over $200,000 just in office space and computer facilities that NRCS provides for our staff. So it's a very close partnership between the district and NRCS Vermont. Next slide, please. So I mentioned about 20 full and part-time technical administrative staff. It's approximately 15.5 full-time equivalents. I also want to highlight the fact that it's not only districts and NRCS that have a tight working relationship, but we also do with the state agencies involved in water quality. It's really because Vermont is a small state. There's pretty stringent environmental standards, but a good spirit of collaboration between the agencies. We have a formal partnership with, I believe it's 9 entities that have signed an MOU over a number of years. And really the catalyst for that was a significant amount of NRCS funding coming to our state and needing to coordinate efforts so we're not all falling all over each other. So that partnership, in addition to the entities shown here, includes University of Vermont Extension as a key partner, Fish and Wildlife, FSA, Lake Champlain Basin Program, a few others, that Vermont Housing Conservation Board. But shown in an earlier slide, NRCS is the largest funder of the private agricultural sector in Vermont. And the partners acknowledge how important getting that financial assistance to farmers on the ground was. So we would sit around and they would say, how can we help you, NRCS, in getting more projects on the ground? And NRCS would say, we need more TA. We need another cartographic technician. We need another program assistant. And the state agencies would actually go out to bid and support that. So that's demonstrated here. You can see that of these positions, about 7.5 are funded through this agreement from NRCS. Another 2.5 are funded by the Agency of Agriculture. They're conservation planners. Another 2.5 are funded by the Department of Environmental Conservation. And then roughly 3 starting in 2020 by NACD. So my job as the executive director, Carly, is to maintain our programs and diversify our funding sources. So even though the impetus for a lot of this is to get NRCS work on the ground, and behind it is a lot of NRCS funding. So for example, the DEC funding is RCPP funding, the NACD funding is NRCS funding as well. I have a variety of agreements that help me not be entirely dependent on Vicki to sustain the VACD staff. Next slide, please.
Ladies, you've got about 3 minutes. I missed the 5-minute mark.
I think we can wrap it up. So why program assistance? We've got pictures of the 3 program assistants here that are funded by the NACD grant funds. And so just so everybody understands the significant role that these individuals play for our district conservationists in particular, and the soil conservationists, is that they do all of the administrative work associated with receiving applications, processing those applications, sending out payment, you know, here's your 1245, please fill it out, send it back, and also the annual practice reminder letters. They're also critical in helping us track contract management metrics, when contracts are expiring, et cetera. So with the increases in the workload, I mentioned we realized we needed more program assistance, and I wasn't able to fund them. Just as Jill said, she needed to diversify funding sources. So the NACD grant funds came around at a really opportune time for us to take advantage of those and actually build up the capacity for us to manage the workload that was coming in as a result of this new initiative. So we did add 3 program assistants to the, we call them our conservation staff. We try not to distinguish between NRCS and VACD staff. We all sit together in the same office. This is actually a sideways picture of our St. Albans office, which is crammed in 48 square foot cubes, not very COVID friendly. So anyhow, next slide, Meg. Going forward, I will just mention that this past year, we realized that we really needed to re-strategize on how we were getting the work done and what role everybody played. So we went through a continuous process improvement process with experts in the Lean Six Sigma streamlining efforts, brought them in and helped us look at every single thing from the beginning steps of conservation planning to paying for conservation practice at the end and signing off, and who was going to do what. And ended up through all that process deciding that we even had more work that we could shift to the program assistants. And so we are going to be training them on the use of ArcGIS and Conservation Desktop, and actually trying to have the conservation planners come in, give them the conservation plan and say, program assistant, you write the contract. So we're trying to minimize our soil conservationists and district conservationists from having any role in that contracting and contract management process, other than just, you know, obligating the funds and approving payments. But all the paperwork would be done by these program assistants. We've estimated that we'll free up about 2.5 soil cons statewide with this change. It doesn't seem significant, but it is in a small state. We renamed the land treatment planners to just general conservation planners, so these VACD staff will serve in a similar role as our soil conservationists. Next.
So this is the result of the NACD grants we've had in 2018 and 19. And we did actually have a cartographic technician. So these are the results of at that time, these are the results of the work of the program assistants. And I just want to reiterate, I don't need to read this, that the benefit of the program assistants doing what they do well is that the conservation planners and soil cons spend more time on the ground with farmers, following up, implementing their conservation plan. And that's ultimately our goal. I think we can stop there.
Wonderful.
The last slide is thank you.
Well, thank you very much, all of you. We do have a couple of questions. I'm going to just go ahead and leave this slide up. Christy, is the tribal community interested in having a member being directly employed by the conservation district for projects in the future? Do you see a benefit in this?
Let's see, and having a tribal member directly employed, or is that?
Having a member, I assume a tribal member.
Yes, we have about half of our staff are tribal members. And that is, yeah, very important for our district. We're always looking to increase that percentage as well.
Wonderful. Caitlin.
And yeah, part of what we do is that we hire youth.
Yes, thank you. Caitlin, what has been your experience working as a woman as an agronomist?
It's been really positive so far. All the producers and co-op staff and ag retailers are all really receptive to me, and they value me just as they would anyone else. And I think that's credited to Kira and I kind of talked. They're used to dealing with women in ag in this area. The Ottawa Co-op has a few women agronomists, so they're used to women in this role. Do you have anything to add, Carrie?
We're fortunate, like she said, a lot of our producers, multi-generation family farmers and so forth, and when they come to the office, they get to deal with a woman. The only male that we have on staff is our conservation technician right now. So I don't think we've run into issues. I've, like I said, been here 20 years, and fortunately there's not a barrier for us.
And we've done women in ag events as well that we've helped plan and speak at to encourage the women that are the operators of the farm. We encourage them to look into programs and communicate and be active.
Well, thank you. Everyone, that's it, the only questions we had. We do have 10 minutes left. Does anyone have any closing comments, thoughts they would like to share or they forgot to throw into their presentation? Fair enough. For anyone in the audience, if you have further questions, here is my contact information again. Please feel free to reach out and talk to me. As I said, there are about a dozen of us at NACD that are involved in managing and working with the grantees, and so any of us would be happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you for joining us today, and our presentation is over. Thank you. Thank you, presenters.
Okay, Meg, are you ready to end the recording then?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end it then. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Grant. I appreciate your help.
No problem, anytime.